Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Chapter 11, Our Dear Brother. A touch on the lawyer's wrinkled hand as he stands in the dark room, irresolute, makes him start and say, "What's that?" "It's me," returns the old man of the house, whose breath is in his ear. "Can't you wake him?" "No." "What have you done with your candle?" "It's gone out. Here it is." Crook takes it, goes to the fire, stoops over the red embers, and tries to get a light. The dying ashes have no light to spare, and his endeavors are vain. Muttering that he will go down and bring a lighted candle from the shop, the old man departs. Mr. Tulkinghorn does not await his return in the room, but on the stairs outside. The welcome light soon shines upon the wall as Crook comes slowly up with his green-eyed cat following at his heels. "Does the man usually sleep like this?" inquires the lawyer in a low voice. "I don't know," says Crook, shaking his head and lifting his eyebrows. "I know next to nothing of his habits, except that he keeps himself very close." Thus whispering, they both go in together. As the light goes in, the great eyes in the shutters, darkening, seem to close. Not so the eyes upon the bed. "God save us!" exclaims Mr. Tulkinghorn. "He is dead!" Crook drops the heavy hand he has taken up so suddenly that the arm swings over the bedside, and they look at one another for a moment. "Send for some doctor. Call for Miss Flight up the stairs, sir. He is poisoned by the bed. Call out for Flight, will you?" says Crook. Mr. Tulkinghorn hurries to the landing and calls, "Miss Flight! Flight! Make haste, whoever you are, Flight!" Crook follows him with his eyes. "Run, Flight, run! The nearest doctor, run!" Or, "Run, Flight, run! The nearest doctor, run!" So Mr. Crook addresses a crazy little woman who is his female lodger, who appears and vanishes in a breath, who soon returns accompanied by a testy medical man, brought from his dinner with a broad, stuffy upper lip and a broad Scotch tongue. Bless the hearts of ye," says the medical man, looking up at them after a moment's examination. "He's just as dead as Fairy." Mr. Tulkinghorn, standing by the old portmanteau, inquires if he has been dead some time. "Any time, sir," says the medical man. "It's probable he will have been dead about 3 hours." "About that time, I should say," observes a dark young man on the other side of the bed. "Are ye in the medical profession yourself, sir?" inquires the first. The young dark man says yes. "Then I'll just take my departure," replies the other, "for I'm nae good here." By which remark he finishes his brief attendance and returns to finish his dinner. The dark young surgeon passes the candle across the face and carefully examines the law writer, who has established his pretensions to his name by becoming indeed no one. "I knew this person by sight very well," says he. "He has purchased opium of me for the last 1.5 years. Was anybody present related to him?" glancing round upon the 3 bystanders. "I was his landlord," grimly answers Crook. "He told me once I was the nearest relation he had." "He has died," said the surgeon, "of an overdose of opium. There is no doubt. The room is strangely flavored with it. There is enough here now," taking an old teapot from Mr. Crook, "to kill 12 people." "Do you think he did it on purpose?" says Crook. "I can't say. I should think it unlikely, as he has been in the habit of taking so much. But nobody can tell. He was very poor, I suppose." "I suppose he was. His room don't look rich," says Crook, who might have changed eyes with his cat as he cast his sharp glance around. "But I have never been in it since he had it, and he was too close to name his circumstances to me." "Did he owe you any rent?" "6 weeks." "He will never pay it," says the young man, resuming his examination. "It is beyond a doubt that he is indeed as dead as Pharaoh, and to judge from his appearance and condition, I should think it is a happy release. Yet he must have been a good figure when a youth, and I dare say good-looking. I recollect once thinking there was something in his manner, uncouth as it was, that denoted a fall in life. Was that so?" Crook replies, You might as well ask me to describe the ladies whose heads of hair I have got in sacks downstairs, than that he was my lodger for a year and a half, and lived, or didn't live, by law writing. I know no more of him. During this dialogue, Mr. Tulkinghorn has stood aloof by the old portmanteau, with his hands behind him, equally removed, to all appearance, from all kinds of interests. His imperturbable face has been as inexpressive as his rusty cheeks. He has shown neither patience nor impatience, nor attention nor abstraction. He has shown nothing but his shell. He now interposes, addressing the young surgeon in his unmoved professional way. "I looked in here," he observed, "just before you, with the intention of giving this deceased man, whom I know... I looked in here," he observed, "just before you, with the intention of giving this deceased man, whom I never saw alive, some employment at his trade of copying. I had heard of him from my stationer, Snagsby of Cook's Court. Since no one here knows anything about him, it might be well to send for Snagsby. Ah!" to the little crazy woman who proposes in frightened dumb show to go for the law stationer. "Suppose you do." While she is gone, the surgeon abandons his hopeless investigation and covers the subject with the patchwork counterpane. Mr. Crook and he interchange a word or two. Mr. Tulkinghorn says nothing, but stands ever near the old portmanteau. Mr. Snagsby arrives hastily, in his grey coat and his black sleeves. Dear me, he says. "And it has come to this, has it? Bless my soul." "Can you give the person of the house any information about this unfortunate creature, Snagsby?" inquires Mr. Tulkinghorn. "He was in arrears with his rent, it seems, and he must be buried, you know." "Well, sir," says Mr. Snagsby, coughing his apoplectic cough behind his hand, I really don't know what advice I could offer, except sending for the beadle." "I don't speak of advice. I speak of affording some clue to his connections, or to where he came from, or to anything concerning him." "I assure you, sir," said Mr. Snagsby, "that I no more know where he came from than I know—" "Where he has gone, perhaps," suggests the surgeon to help him out. A pause. Mr. Tulkinghorn looking at the law stationer, Mr. Crook with his mouth open, looking for somebody to speak next. "As to his connections, sir," says Mr. Snagsby, "if a person was to say to me, Snagsby, here's £20,000 down, ready for you in the Bank of England if you'll only name one of them, I couldn't do it, sir. About a year and a half ago, he came into our place one morning after breakfast, and finding Mrs. Snagsby in our shop, produced a specimen of his handwriting, and gave her to understand that he was in want of copying work to do, and was, not to put too fine a point upon it, hard up. My little woman is not in general partial to strangers, particularly when they want anything, but she was rather took by something about this person, whether by his being unshaved, or by his hair being in want of attention, or by what other ladies' reasons, I leave you to judge, and she accepted of the specimen, and likewise of the address. My little woman hasn't a good ear for names, and she considered Nemo equal to the name of Nimrod, in consequence of which she got into the habit of saying to me at meals, Mr. Snagsby, you haven't found Nimrod any work yet, or such like. And that is the way he gradually fell into job work at our place, and that is the most I know of him, except that he was a quick hand, and a hand not sparing of night work. Hadn't you better see, says Tulkinghorn to Crook, whether he had any papers that may enlighten you? There will be an inquest, and you will be asked the question. You can read? No, I can't, returns the old man with a sudden grin. Snagsby, says Mr. Tulkinghorn, look over the room for him. He will get into some trouble or difficulty otherwise being here. I'll wait, if you make haste, and then I can testify on his behalf, if it should ever be necessary, that all was fair and right. In the first place, here's an old portmanteau, sir, says Snagsby. Ah, to be sure, there is. Mr. Tulkinghorn does not appear to have seen it before, though he is standing so close to it, and though there is very little else, heaven knows. The marine store merchant holds the light, and the law stationer conducts the search. The surgeon leans around the corner of the chimney-piece. Miss Flight peeps and trembles just within the door. The apt old scholar of the old school, with his dull black breeches tied with ribbons at the knees, his large black waistcoat, his long-sleeved black coat, stands in exactly the same place and attitude. There are some worthless articles of clothing in the old portmanteau. There is a bundle of pawnbrokers' duplicates, those turnpike tickets on the road of poverty. There is a crumpled paper, smelling of opium, on which are scrawled rough memoranda. There are a few dirty scraps of newspapers, all referring to coroner's inquests. There is nothing else. They search the cupboard and the drawer of the ink-splashed table. There is not a morsel of an old letter, or of any other writing at either. The old surgeon examines the dress on the law writer. A knife and some old halfpence are all he finds. Mr. Snagsby's suggestion is the practical suggestion after all, and the beadle must be called for. So the little crazy lodger goes for the beadle, and the rest come out of the room. Don't leave the cat there," says the surgeon. "That won't do." Mr. Crook therefore drives her out before him, and she goes furtively downstairs, winding her lithe tail and licking her lips. "Good night," says Mrs. Tulkinghorn, and goes home to allegory and meditation. By the time the news had got into the court, groups of inhabitants assemble to discuss the thing, and the outposts of the army of observation, principally boys, are pushed forward to Mr. Crook's window, which they closely invest. A policeman has already walked up to the room and walked down again to the door, where he stands like a tower. People talk across the court, out of the window, and bareheaded in the midst of this sensation, the beadle arrives. The beadle, though generally understood in the neighborhood to be a ridiculous institution, is not without a certain popularity for the moment. If it were only as a man who is going to see the body. The sensation is heightened as the tidings spread from mouth to mouth that the beadle is on the ground and has gone in. By and by the beadle comes out, once more intensifying the sensation, which has rather languished at the interval. He is understood to be in want of witnesses for the inquest tomorrow. Who can tell the coroner and jury anything whatever respecting the deceased? It is immediately referred to innumerable people who can tell nothing whatever. Public loses interest and undergoes reaction. And all that night the coffin stands ready by the old portmanteau, and the lonely figure on the bed, whose path in life has lain throughout 45 years, lies there, with no more track behind him that any one can trace than a deserted infant. The next day the court is all alive. The coroner is to sit in the first-floor room at the Soul's Arms, where the harmonic meetings take place twice a week. The Soul's Arms does a brisk stroke of business all the morning. At the appointed hour arrives the coroner, who is received with a salute of skittles from the good dry skittle ground attached to the Soul's Arms. He is conducted by the beadle and the landlord to the harmonic meeting room, where he puts his hat on the piano and takes a Windsor cigar at the head of a long table, formed of several short tables put together. As many of the jury can crowd together at the table sit there. The rest get among the spittoons and pipes, or lean against the piano. "Well, gentlemen," the coroner begins, "you are impaneled here to inquire into the death of a certain man. Evidence will be given before you as to the circumstances attending his death, and you will give your verdict according to the evidence, and not according to anything else. The first thing to be done is to view the body." So they go out in a loose procession, something after the manner of a straggling funeral, and make their inspection in Mr. Crook's back second floor. The beadle is very careful that 2 gentlemen should see all that is to be seen, for they are public chroniclers, and he hopes to read in print what Mooney, the active and intelligent beadle, said and did. On their return, Mr. Tulkinghorn is received with distinction and seated near the coroner. The inquiry proceeds. The jury learn how the subject of their inquiry died, and learn no more about him. A very eminent scholar is in attendance, gentlemen, says the coroner, who, I am informed, was accidentally present when the discovery of the death was made, but he could only repeat the evidence you have already heard from the surgeon, the landlord, the lodger, and the law stationer. It is not necessary to trouble him. Is anybody in attendance who knows anything more? Mrs. Piper pushed forward. Mrs. Piper sworn. Anastasia Piper, gentlemen. Married woman, now Mrs. Piper. What have you got to say about this? Why, Mrs. Piper has not much to tell. Has seen the plaintiff, as she insists on calling the deceased, vexed and worried by the children, has seen him hurry away when run and called after, as if not partial to children, and never seen him speak to neither child nor grown person at any time excepting the boy that sweeps the crossing down the lane over the way round the corner. Says the coroner, Is that boy here? Says the beadle. No, sir, he is not here, says the coroner. Go and fetch him, then. In the absence of the active and intelligent, the coroner converses with Mr. Tulkinghorn. Oh, here's the boy, gentlemen. Here he is, very muddy, very hoarse, very ragged. Now, boy! But stop a minute, caution. This boy must be put through a few preliminary paces. Name, Joe. Nothing else that he knows on. Don't know that everybody has two names. Never heard of such a think. Don't know that Joe is short for a longer name. Thinks it is long enough for him. Don't find no fault with it. Spell it? No, he can't spell it. No father, no mother, no friends, never been to school. What's home? Knows a broom's a broom, and knows it's wicked to tell a lie. Don't recollect who told him about the broom or about the lie, but knows both. Can't exactly say what'll be done to him after he's dead, if he tells a lie to the gentleman here, but believes it'll be something wery bad to punish him and serve him right, and so he'll tell the truth. This won't do, gentlemen, says the coroner with a melancholy shake of his head. Don't you think you can receive the evidence, sir? Asked an attentive juryman. Out of the question, says the coroner. You have heard the boy. Can't exactly say won't do. Can't exactly say won't do, you know. We can't take that in a court of justice, gentlemen. Put the boy aside. Boy put aside to the great edification of the audience. Now, is there any other witness? No. No other witness. Very well, gentlemen. Here is a man, unknown, proved to have been in the habit of taking opium in large quantities for a year and a half, found dead of too much opium. If you think you have any evidence to lead you to the conclusion that he committed suicide, you will come to that conclusion. If you think it is a case of accidental death, you will find the verdict accordingly. Verdict accordingly, accidental death, no doubt. Gentlemen, you are discharged. Good afternoon. While the coroner buttons his greatcoat, Mr. Tulkinghorn and he give private audience to the rejected witness in the court, that graceless creature known only that graceless creature only knows that the dead man, whom he recognized just now by his yellow face and black hair, was sometimes hooted and pursued about the streets, that the man had often spoken to him and asked him whether he slept sound at night, and how he bore cold and hunger, and whether he ever wished to die, and similar strange questions. That when the man had no money, he would say in passing, I am as poor as you today, Joe. But that when he had any, he had always been glad to give him some. He was very good to me, says the boy, wiping his eyes with his wretched sleeve. When I see him a-layin' so stretched out just now, I wished he could have heard me tell him so. He was very good to me, he was. As he shuffles downstairs, Mr. Snagsby, lying in wait for him, puts a half-crown in his hand. If you ever see me coming past your crossing with my little woman, I mean a lady, says Mr. Snagsby, and with his finger to his nose, don't allude to it. Thus, gradually, the soul's arms melts into the shadowy night. There is rest around the lonely figure, now laid out in its last earthly habitation, and it is watched by the gaunt eyes in the shutters through some quiet hours of night. It is everything but a night of rest for Mr. Snagsby in Cook's Garden, where guster murders sleep by going, as Mr. Snagsby himself allows, out of one fit into 20. Daylight comes. Morning comes. Noon comes. Then the active and intelligent, who has got into the morning papers as such, comes with his pauper company to Mr. Crook's and bears off the body of our dear brother here departed to a hemmed-in churchyard, pestiferous and obscene, whence malignant diseases are communicated to the bodies of our dear brothers and sisters who have not departed, into a beastly scrap of ground where Turk would reject as a savage abomination, and a Caffrey would shudder at they being our dear brother here departed to receive Christian burial. With the night comes a slouching figure through the tunnel court. On the outside of the iron gate, he holds the gate with his hands and looks in between the bars, stands looking in for a little while, then, with an old broom it carries softly, sweeps the step, and makes the archway clean. It does so very busily and trimly, looks in again a little while, and so departs. And that is the end of chapter 11.